Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin to speak about COVID-19, I just want to say a few words about the search for the missing teenager Noah Donoghue. Our thoughts in the Executive are obviously with Noah's family today, and particularly his mother Fiona, who is having to go through the worst kind of nightmare, the kind of nightmare that no parent should have to endure. Over this past few days, the people of Belfast and beyond have rallied around the Donoghue family by getting behind efforts to locate Noah. And as people from all backgrounds have scoured the streets of the city, we have seen Belfast at its best. We know all of you will continue to work with the police as they try to locate Noah. And I would appeal to those of you who have unoccupied houses to check them, as well as garages, gardens, or outhouses in the north of the city, just in case Noah is there. And I urge those of you who maybe have CCTV footage that could help police to trace his whereabouts to please check it. In the meantime, I send my prayerful support to Noah's family and friends to stay strong in what I can only imagine is the most distressing of situations. Please know that everyone stands with you, and the safe return of Noah is very much uppermost in our thoughts. The Executive today have received an update from the Health Minister and his team on the ongoing efforts to limit the spread of COVID-19 in Northern Ireland. The estimated R value remains at 0.6 to 0.9, and the average daily number of positive cases is now less than 5, and the total number of infectious individuals is estimated to be less than 600. Yesterday, the working group of church and faith leaders met again, and they have had a very productive engagement involving Junior Minister Lyons and Kearney, and the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor. Further to those discussions, the Executive is pleased to announce that places of worship will be permitted to open from the 29th of June, provided all appropriate mitigation measures are observed. The Executive also confirmed today the reopening as planned within the public health guidelines of self-catering tourist accommodation caravan parks and campsites from the 26th of June, that's tomorrow, hotels, restaurants, bars, cafes and coffee shops from the 3rd of July, and visitor attractions from the 3rd of July, with the exception of museums and galleries. Close contact services such as nail, hair and beauty from the 6th of July. Our elite athletes have also been allowed to train outdoors, and today the Executive has agreed that they should be able to use indoor training facilities from the 29th of June. The Executive has also approved today, and will publish shortly, a broader indicative timeframe for further relaxation of restrictions. These provisional dates will allow people to plan for the resumption of activities and will be subject to ratification closer to the time by the Executive, obviously in consultation with the medical and scientific advisors. Some of the proposed areas for opening incorporated in the timetable include betting shops from the 3rd of July, additional close contact services such as tattoo parlours, reflexology and complementary therapies from the 6th of July, indoor gyms and outdoor playgrounds from the 10th of July, libraries from the 16th of July, competitive sport from my birthday, which is the 17th of July, and leisure centres and soft play areas from the 7th of August. The Executive had further detailed discussions too around physical distancing, something which we have visited many times over this past number of weeks. Everyone's objective should always be to stay 2 metres apart from those from other households wherever possible. However, a minimum 1 metre distance between individuals can be considered acceptable in circumstances where appropriate mitigations are made. This issue, of course, is of particular relevance to the hospitality industry, and we will need to work closely with that sector to make sure that we can work out the appropriate mitigations for that industry. Deputy First Minister, myself and the Economy Minister will meet with representatives of the hospitality sector to reinforce our expectations on that front. All of the relaxations announced by the Executive in recent days have been brought about by the efforts you have made to keep yourselves and indeed others safe. We have made significant progress, but the last place any of us want to be is having to see those relaxations rolled back at some point in the future, because that would be extremely disappointing for each and every one of us, but it would be particularly damaging for our economy. Northern Ireland is opening up again. However, there is an onus on all of us not to ease up the fight and the vigilance against COVID-19. We must continue to be alert and sensible in how we act. To unlock the other relaxation signal today, it will require the same self-discipline you have all shown since March of this year. It will require you to exercise the freedoms you have regained sensitively and responsibly. And when in public, you must be conscious at all times of the threat of COVID-19. That means observing the latest guidance on social distancing and hand hygiene. It means moving quickly to self-isolate with others in your home if you suspect that you have COVID-19, contacting the test and trace team, arranging a COVID-19 test, and mapping out your movements in recent days so that we can alert others to see if they are infected. It means ensuring that your business has appropriate signage, social distancing measures, protective measures in place for your staff and for your customers. It essentially means not gambling with yours and other people's lives by flouting the public health advice. We're asking you again to be responsible and to be our partners, the executive partners, so we can move ahead. The lesson of this past few months is clear. If we continue to work together, we will continue to make progress, we will stay safe, and we will save lives. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Arlene, and good afternoon to everyone. Can I also begin today by sending my thoughts to the family of and his friends of Noah Donoghue, who's been missing in North Belfast since Sunday. I want to reiterate the latest appeal from the PSNI and ask everyone to please take a look around them, check your gardens, check your properties, your cars, caravans, anything that you have around you. Please check for any signs of Noah. We can only imagine the heartbreak that's being felt right now by his family. And we can only pray for his safe return. So please, everybody, do your best to try and join the effort to find him. So the Executive has met again today to discuss the next phase of our approach to dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. From the outset of the pandemic, almost 4 months ago, we said that we would need to work together in the battle of COVID-19. We have come through the first phase of what has been the most challenging of times. 547 people have lost their lives. These are not statistics, but these are loved family members and friends who are being mourned and who are being missed. I want to start today by turning to the current level of community transmission. Today, our R rate, the level of transmission, sits between 0.6 and 0.9. The community transmission rate is as low as it will reach in the absence of a vaccine. So for now, and just for now, transmission levels appear to be stabilised, and that's a very positive thing. However, we can't be complacent. The fact is that the virus is still active and it's within our community. This virus can resurge. We will need to mitigate against that possibility as much as we can. At the start of this pandemic, we made a promise to you. We said that we wouldn't keep things in place for any longer than necessary. We said that we would lift the restrictions as soon as we possibly could. And all our decisions on the restrictions to date have been made with reference to community well-being and public health, developing a pathway to economic and social recovery, and ensuring the resilience of our health and social care system. In recent weeks, we've announced that we had begun a continuous rolling programme of lifting restrictions. And now the Executive believes that within this new context, with regard to the medical and scientific advice, and by seeking to mitigate or minimise the risk, that we can publish a roadmap of relaxations across all sections of society, matched to indicative dates from now up until the end of August. This timetable will make it very clear that within the coming weeks, what the coming weeks looks like as we seek to build a new normal in which we will continue to live with this virus. I want to caveat our plan by saying this. This approach will only work if we continue to work in partnership. This is a contract with individuals, with business leaders, with faith leaders. The virus is still with us, but the virus itself doesn't spread by itself. It's you or it's us that actually, and our actions, which spread the virus. So caution is imperative, and our behaviour is essential to minimise the continued risk. As I've said, throughout this, we've always emphasised the need for partnership, and it's in line with that partnership approach that we have now held good meetings with church leaders, we've met with representatives of sporting codes and local business leaders, and therefore today we can confirm that places of worship can open from the 29th of June, adhering to public health advice. And that means that services can take place, and we'll say more about weddings and funerals on Monday. Contact sport training, grassroots and elite, will commence from Monday the 29th of June, with competitive sport opening up from the 17th of July. And again, we provide more guidance about this on Monday. But this means that our sporting disciplines, such as GAA, soccer and rugby, can begin training as normal. A number of anomalies have also been identified, such as holistic therapies and reflexology. These have all been aligned now with the 6th of July opening date. The Executive has also been given detailed consideration to the social distancing requirements, and we have agreed and continue to believe that 2 metres remains the optimum distance to maintain physical distance where possible. We are very clear that 2 metres poses less risk, but we have been listening very carefully to the concerns of business, and particularly the tourism and hospitality sectors, about being able to make their businesses work within these parameters. So we have agreed today, as long as appropriate mitigations can be made, a distance of no less than 1 metre between individuals can be permissible. Such mitigations, looking at issues like the type of environment, whether it's indoors or outdoors, how good the ventilation is in the area, the length of exposure time, whether or not face coverings are being used. These are all the things that need to be carefully considered if the 2 metre distance is reduced. Myself and Arlene will now be engaging quickly with the hospitality sector to discuss this issue and to ensure that the businesses are fully aware of their responsibilities in keeping people safe. In addition, today the Executive has agreed the following conditional relaxations. Further close contact services will hopefully reopen from the 6th of July. Betting shops can open from the 3rd of July. Indoor gyms can reopen from the 10th of July. Outdoor playgrounds can reopen from the 10th of July. Our libraries can open their doors from the 16th of July. Competitive sport can restart on the 17th of July. Limited numbers of outdoor spectators will be permitted from the 17th of July, with those numbers increased on the 31st of July. Reopening of indoor sports courts and skating rinks will happen from the 7th of August. Seated venues such as bingo halls can welcome people back from the 29th of July. Arcades can also open from the 29th of July, and then leisure centres and soft play areas can open or plan for reopening from the 7th of August. Socially distanced indoor spectators will be permitted from the 28th of August, and open-air museums can operate from late August. So, as well as giving businesses something to plan towards, these indicative dates are intended to give preparation time to get ready to reopen as safely as possible, making sure that all the necessary health and safety precautions are in place in advance of that date. But let me be very clear, our ability to confirm these dates will be dependent on our control over the transmission levels of the virus closer to the time. We need to be open about the fact that we may need to amend these dates in light of the emergent situation, and the Executive is also prepared to step back if the need arises. So our message today is very much that we are making good progress, and everyone should take hope from that. But we need to stress that the threat from COVID-19 still exists. We must all remain vigilant and continue acting with social responsibility. We need to build and expand on our commitment to partnership. If we do so, we can continue to give in hope and normalising life and coming through all of this safely. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ministers. You make pretty clear there that the decision to move from 2 metres to 1 metre is very much in response to the fact that, for instance, the like of the hospitality industry would benefit greatly from that. But does that mean then that the science has not changed, that this is a policy decision? So can people be assured that they will be safe when they go to places like restaurants and hotels?
All of these issues, Tracy, and thank you for the question, are around the management of risk. Even the 2 metre rule is a management of risk tool in relation to social distancing. And the reason why we believe that we can move to the 1 metre is in relation to having other mitigations in place to manage that risk. Nothing is risk-free in this scenario, and therefore it is important that the hospitality and tourism sector continues to work with the executive to find the appropriate mitigations for their particular areas. Obviously, hand hygiene remains a very key part of that, having sanitisers, how the different hospitality venues are actually repurposed, how people are sitting at tables, whether there's a need for having perspex in certain areas. All of these things will be looked at with the hospitality industry. I have to say they have been very good in coming forward with their various mitigation plans. So it is, the science hasn't changed, and I think when the Chief Medical Officer was at the press conference on Tuesday, he was very clear that because, as Michelle has said, the transmission of the virus is at such a low rate in our community, the science was unlikely to change in relation to this issue. So it is a policy decision, one that we have ruminated about for quite some time, but we believe now is the right time to move and to have those various mitigations in place.
Yes, just to add, I think that Arlene's absolutely right. Everything we do now comes with risk. Everything comes with a degree of risk. But, we said every day we come to the press conference, we said we continue to keep this under review. That is what we have done. But it is, the virus, the community transmission of the virus is as low as it's going to be in the absence of a vaccine. We also have a strong contact tracing system in place, which means that if, for example, we were to see a cluster develop, an outbreak develop at a certain place or a geographical area or whatever that may look like, then we're able to respond quickly. So that's why we feel we have the confidence to move on this now, and we continue to monitor it all very, very carefully.
The one thing that isn't been announced today is the extension of the free school meals scheme, something that all the parties in the executive have said that they want to see extended. Now, the understanding is that the reason why the finance paper hasn't been brought before the executive is because of the dispute over the Troubles Victims Pension. So what would you say to the families of the 97,000 children who are waiting to find out whether or not they are going to get this scheme extended over the summer? Can you reassure them that they haven't been caught up in a bigger political row?
Well, I'm very pleased to tell you, Tracy, that issue has now been resolved. There has been a lot of hard work going on over this past week in the background, and the Finance Minister will come to the Assembly on Tuesday to make a statement around the monitoring round, and he will be setting out, it's no surprise, he'll be setting out the issue on free school meals, and we're very pleased that that is the case.
Yeah, I think it's regrettable that some ministers choose to brief out of executive meetings. We don't resolve everything in every day that we discuss it, but certainly this has been an ongoing process. There was never any question that free school meals wouldn't be paid. We agreed that that would be the case. It's just a matter of confirming it through the executive and assembly procedures. But there's no doubt that free school meals will continue to be paid over the summer period, and all those families will receive their payment. And in addition to that, we also have the Eat Well, Live Well scheme, so to tackle holiday hunger. That is something that we feel very strongly about as families manage their way through what has been a challenging time because people have been out of work and people are struggling. So we recognise all of that. So as I said, it's never been in doubt, despite what some people choose to talk about.
So just to pick up on that, Ministers, good afternoon. Enda McLafferty here from the BBC. So are you saying then that there was no dispute around the Troubles pension scheme, which delayed the free school meal scheme from kicking into place?
No, we're not saying that there's not a difference of opinion in relation to the victims' pension payment. There clearly is a difference of opinion in relation to that. We have resolved some issues in relation to the monitoring round, and will now continue to work on all of the other outstanding issues. I think the good news today is that we will have a monitoring round statement on Tuesday, which will deal with the issue of free school meals, as Michelle has indicated, because it is vitally important that we continue to support families in the summer months. We realise how difficult this past period of time has been for many, many families right across Northern Ireland. So we were all determined to see that dealt with, and therefore there will be a statement on Tuesday in that regard.
And yes, just to say, I want to see a victims payment scheme in place. We clearly have a difference of opinion between ourselves as to what that should look like. But certainly, we have a June monitoring process. Different departments make bids. That's all assessed. It's responded to. Some people will agree with some things, some people won't agree with some things. But this is just the cut and thrust of everyday work which we do in the executive. But all these things will be confirmed in the Assembly chamber next week.
And can I just pick up on the raft of changes that you've announced that's going to take us right up past the First Minister's birthday on the 17th, right into August, with all the changes which are coming down the track? This is obviously going to mean more pressure on public transport. Do you both agree with the Infrastructure Minister, Nicola Mallon, that the wearing of face coverings should become compulsory on buses and trains?
Well, we're certainly discussing that issue at the Executive. Again, I think these executive discussions should have the ability to have those discussions in a private fashion. Obviously, some ministers don't agree with that collective responsibility piece and take the view that they should be able to speak freely to the press. But certainly it's something that we are considering. In particular, we're considering the legal basis for that, whether it needs to be in the coronavirus regulations or whether it can be satisfied through guidance, because of course there are many things that the community in Northern Ireland have been dealing with through this terrible pandemic, which have just had the backing of guidance. It hasn't actually been in the regulations. So that's a discussion that's ongoing.
And can I say that this will be discussed again at Monday's executive, but the position is very clear even as of now. We strongly recommend that people use face coverings, and particularly in areas where you can't socially distance or you're in an enclosed space, or perhaps it's not a well ventilated shop perhaps that you may go into. So our advice today is to strongly recommend using those face coverings where you can, and we'll come back to whether or not it should be compulsory or not at Monday's executive.
Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon. I just wanted to ask, you probably saw the headlines about increases in Europe in terms of the rate of spread there. Is the executive going too fast in its approach to relaxing the restrictions, and are you worried about a second spike?
Well, let me say this, Michael. In terms of Germany, the R rate rose, I think, to nearly 3 because of a very particular issue in a town with I think it was some sort of a meat factory. We've also seen clusters in North Wales around some meat factories and flour factories. I think it is something that we should talk about in terms of outbreaks happening in clusters around Northern Ireland. We are very clear that we are prepared for that, and we will take the appropriate action when that arises. The Chief Scientific Advisor said very clearly today at the Executive that he would be able to flag up if any issues were occurring, so that we could then take a forward look and see what it was that we needed to do to deal with those clusters. And Michael, I think it is fair to say there will be clusters across Northern Ireland, and we don't want that to come as a surprise to people when it happens. But the important thing is, if we manage our social distancing, if we manage all the public health advice that we have been given out, then we will minimise the risk of those clusters from happening. But just to say to people, to the public, that we are prepared for those clusters and we will deal with them if and when they arise.
Yes, Michael, we said from the very start, whenever we published our pathway to recovery, that there were a number of things that needed to be in order for us to be able to make relaxations. And that was that we would have the transmission under control, and that appears to be the case today. We said that our health service had to be able to cope. That is the case today. And we said we wouldn't ask people to do things for longer than necessary, and that we'd be very reasonable and proportionate to our response. So that's why we've been able to make these announcements today. These are indicative dates, and that's why we caveat everything by saying that if we, for example, started to see a rise in transmission, then we'd have to, pull back perhaps. But we don't want to get there. So if we have continued compliance in the partnership that we talk about is really, really important. If we continue to have that, then there's no reason why we can't keep making positive steps forward. But we are very alert to the fact, because we do look at examples elsewhere, and we look to how there has been a resurgence in certain places. We look at the issue of clusters, and we believe we will have issues around clustering. So we're alert to those things, and we'll just have to keep monitoring it. And as Arlene has said, the Chief Scientific Officer's advice is that we have a strong contact tracing system in place that allows us to identify those things quickly. And the last thing I would say is that these are easements, these are restrictions that we are lifting. They're not compulsory. We're not asking people to run out the door straight away and start to go to all of these things. What we're saying is that it's now permissible. However, you know, we still are in the pandemic, so we're asking people to be cautious.
Yes, and just, I mean, just on that latter point, do you expect people to be confident enough to go to places like nail salons or indoor gyms in the weeks ahead?
I think you're going to have a whole mixture of feelings out there. I think there'll be mixed emotions. I think for people, particularly people who, for example, who've been shielding, they'll be apprehensive about going out and about whenever they're able to. I think there'll be people who'll be beating the doors down of hairdressers and nail bars and all the rest. But I also think, seriously, I think there is people who are going to be very concerned and very anxious about going forward. So we need to try and build that confidence, and that not be just down to us as an executive to do that. That's going to be an industry-wide approach. How do we build confidence again that people feel safe to go out and about and to perhaps go to the shop or go for something to eat or do whatever it is that makes them happy. So I think that we'll probably have a bit of work to do around building that confidence again. But I think that'll come in time as the community transmission of the virus continues to remain low.
Afternoon, Ministers. Nigel Gould, Downtown Radio and Cool FM. Look, just to follow on from the topic that Michael introduced there, given what seems now like a really rapid exit from lockdown, invariably there will be concerns over COVID flare-ups or clusters, as you've alluded to there, as we've obviously seen in other countries. I'm just wondering, particularly on the back of an open letter to politicians across the UK, which was printed in this week's BMJ, on behalf of various health bodies, including the Royal Colleges, in which they call for a specific Four Nations review to take place now, so as to make sure we're in a state of readiness while all of the easing of lockdown continues. They've said this is vital and needs to happen right now. Is this something you would support, indeed pursue, even if to ensure public confidence, which is something that I know you both have mentioned in the past?
Well, Nigel, we have worked, as you know, in the Four Nations approach. We continue to do that. I think it is important that we do review what has happened to date. We, in the Executive, have reviewed our coronavirus strategy. We did that internally. But it's also important that we say to the public that we know there will be clusters, some of them small, some of them slightly larger. I think what the public want to hear from us is that we are prepared for that we know it's coming down the road. And that would be coming down the road, Nigel, even if we didn't have some of these relaxations that we're talking about today in terms of indicative dates into the future. Because they seem to be occurring in areas of workplaces and in cooler areas of workplaces, also in some places happening in other areas where people are coming together. So we need to be alert to that and to deal with it when it happens. So I think what people want to see us saying is we know it may well happen and we'll be ready if and when it does happen.
And I think in terms of a review, I mean, we come at this with an executive response and we need to review the whole executive response. That should be part and parcel of anything. When you come through something of this scale, we of course will learn lessons, there's no doubt, and that should make us in an even better state of preparedness for anything that comes at us in the time ahead. But yeah, absolutely have to learn lessons, that should be just part and parcel of everyday business.
Also, I noticed you referred to indicative dates for a number of reopenings. There were a lot to get the grips with there today, but no mention of cinemas. Maybe if there was, I certainly didn't pick that up. Owners have certainly been telling us that they're pretty much ready to open with booking systems in place. So I'm wondering what the hold-up is and if they can expect guidance on this anytime soon.
So Nigel, we do hope that this document in relation to indicative times, it's difficult to pick everything up as we go through it, will be published shortly, if not today, certainly tomorrow. And when it does come out, you will see that seated venues, including bingo and cinemas, will be at the 29th of July as an indicative date that has been looked at. Now, that may well come forward, or indeed it may have to be further into August, but that's the indicative date that we're looking at the moment, the 29th of July.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Ministers. Morris here from Belfast Live. Michelle rather referred to my question there earlier, but if you'll forgive me for pressing a little, we're told there's more details to come on Monday regarding churches, but for people who perhaps have lost a loved one in recent days and are wondering about a funeral that may well be on Monday, which is the 29th, can you give us, any hint as to what kind of clarity we're going to be getting? I had heard the churches were pressing for perhaps, rather than a fixed number, something like a percentage, given that 30 people might well be a large number in a small church, but not so much in a larger church. Would a percentage, is that something perhaps that's being looked at? Could you give us some guidance as to what we might expect on Monday? Thank you.
Well, I suppose in line with the theme that we have identified from the very start, this is about partnership. We've been working very closely with the faith leaders around how can we safely reopen. So, initially we'd made a move to individual prayer, and now in conjunction with the faith leaders, there was very good work done this week around what could reopening look like. We are, because of the responsibility piece and the partnership piece, yes, we think that it's, instead of us being prescriptive, because every church or chapel or mosque or whatever, how people worship, it'll all be different in size, it'll all be different in shape, it'll be different in terms of ventilation and all those things. So we're working our way through a very responsible approach with the faith leaders to be able to allow them to open their doors and allow people to come in and to do it in a way that just follows the public health advice. So we feel like that's been a very positive piece of work actually that's been done and allows them to open their doors from Monday. And then what we want to do over the course of the next day or so is to work around the numbers. So people are asking us about funerals, about weddings. What does that look like? So we're actively looking at that, and then we'll be able to say a lot more about it on Monday. We're also very conscious of the fact that, for all those people that lost someone over this period, they haven't been able to have their normal wake and their funeral and the things that you normally do whenever you're grieving. And we're very conscious of the fact that that's been a desperate situation for us. And indeed, one of our executive colleagues lost in the middle of this and wasn't able to have their normal funeral. So that's been devastating for families. We want to be able to give them that information, and we'll do that on Monday. I think that covers it, probably.
I think that covers it. Unless you had another question, Morris, that you wanted to...
Well, just in terms of, are you able to elaborate any further on the mitigations that you're hoping to see in place in pubs? Yeah. And while we're obviously keen that the industry is protected and the punters are, many of them are down for their first pint, or are you content that the mitigations in place will protect the staff who work in these bars?
So absolutely, we very much want to make sure that the industry, and they have been very responsible in terms of the protection of staff and clients alike. I think both of those need to be looked at in a very proactive way. So we are talking about, if you have a facility that can manage the 2 metres rule, then you should try and continue with that. We're saying if you don't have enough space and it's not economically viable for you to proceed, then you can go to 1 metre with other mitigations. And so we're talking about the fact that the length of time that you're at a particular place, the length of time has an impact in relation to the transmission of the disease. We're asking people to consider face coverings, although we understand that may not be appropriate if people are going out for a meal. Obviously, hand hygiene, looking at whether you need perspex in a particular area, making sure that surfaces are sanitised and cleaned at all times. So it is about working out a common sense approach in partnership with us to make sure that we keep people safe. And that's what we're determined to do with the industry, and we will continue to have those conversations. The conversations won't stop now that we have said that you can open. Far from it. We'll continue to have those conversations around mitigation and how we work together to protect people into the future.
Thanks.
Hello, Ministers. Amanda Ferguson here from Reuters. I wanted just to pick up there on an issue that's impacting hospitality and other sectors. The purpose of the job retention scheme was to sort of secure employment at least until October. But with the Chancellor introducing employer contributions to the scheme from August, many hospitality and other workers are indicating that they've either been sacked or they're going to be made redundant at the end of July. Is Stormont looking at that? Is there anything that you can do for those people? And the other thing I wanted to ask about was screening. I've been asking on and off about the pause on routine sort of cervical breast cancer screening because of COVID-19 since it started. And on June 17th, the Department of Health said that planning's underway for a phased restoration of all paused screening services. I just noticed today a BBC report saying that breast cancer screening's being resumed by the Action Cancer charity in August, and we've heard a lot about indicative dates today. I'm just wondering, have we got any indicative dates for when health service screening for things like breast cancer and cervical cancer and so on will be?
So, Amanda, on that point about screening, obviously that's an issue for the Minister of Health. As you know, he brought a statement to the Assembly to say that he would start the rollout of services again, and he would be looking at that in a, I think he said, a 3-monthly basis. So we can certainly raise that question with him in relation to breast cancer screening. It's obviously something that we are concerned about when we heard this morning that so many people may have a cancer and not have been diagnosed because of screening. That's something that we are very concerned about. In relation to the job retention scheme, as you know, we have lobbied through the executive and indeed individually through our parties as well around making sure that it is something that helps our industries, and we were pleased when it was extended. But as you say, I think people are looking at the scheme now and looking to see what the forward look is for their particular industry. Of course, we will again communicate with Treasury around the difficulties of the scheme moving forward, and try to represent the interests of industry here in Northern Ireland, because of course that's what we're here to do. So it's a continuing process around trying to influence those national schemes to make sure that they're fit for Northern Ireland, but also to try and see what it is we can do to help here. As you know, we had a number of schemes which hospitality has benefited from, and they have a rates holiday to March of next year as well. So we hope that has been of assistance to the many tourism and hospitality industries.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, in terms of the screening, I mean, I think it's important that lessons are learned out of this period. Just talked about that previously, but I think that when you look at how we've been able to deliver care across a range of areas in this period, we need to take that learning and actually apply it to a health service. We had a plan to transform the health service, and obviously COVID hit and all those things get put on hold. So I think it's important that as we resume normal health services, that these are the things that need to be prioritised. So I know there'll be a particular focus on the issue of screening given the seriousness of it, but I definitely think that we have to get serious about the prevention end of healthcare. We need to be very much focused on trying to see things off before they become an issue down the line. So the screening part is a very necessary part of that. And on the job retention scheme, we also share the concerns. I think we said from very early on here that whenever we were making the case for supports for local businesses, that we're very alert to the fact that some businesses won't make it. That's not a nice thing to say, but it's a reality. So what we've been doing is to try and keep planning, keep giving businesses more scope to be able to open up. We hope that the 2 metre, 1 metre information today will help more people to be viable and to keep jobs going and to keep their businesses going. But there's no doubt there's going to be challenges as the retention scheme tapers off. But we certainly continue to make the case to the Treasury, and will have done all along this pandemic, and will continue to make the case for supports for local businesses.
Ministers, I just wanted to ask one more thing just regarding sort of lessons learned. It's becoming clear the more that I speak to people that there's a considerable number of people out there who should have received shielding letters and didn't, or they only received the second shielding letter, or they've been forced to take holidays to keep themselves safe. Is this something that Stormont's examining? I know that there's been a lot of talk around the likelihood of a second wave or not, and most people believe that a second wave isn't as likely as it was previously, and it would just be a matter of dealing with clusters. But is this issue around who didn't get shielding letters something that Stormont's examining? And I'm just wondering, is there anyone who is perhaps among those who's lost their lives that should have received a shielding letter and didn't?
I wouldn't want to speculate on that, Amanda, because we don't know is the answer. I mean, this is the business of the health department in terms of reaching out to those people who are deemed vulnerable by their clinicians. But if there's there will be a review of all of this, and obviously this is something that has to be looked at. And as we prepare for potentially a second wave or clusters or whatever that looks like, we need to make sure that the lessons are learned in order to be able to put them into effect whenever we find ourselves in that situation. So I've no doubt that the shielding piece will be part of all of the review around that. And you know, the thing to remind shielders is that we haven't stopped shielding. We've said that from the 31st of July you're on pause. That's in order to allow us to be able to quickly turn that switch again if required, because those people are vulnerable. So if there are people who are not in the category, then that needs to be rectified for anything that comes at us down the line. Thanks very much.
Thank you.